She used those exact words. Not poor performance, not cultural fit, not the restructuring language that HR departments have spent decades perfecting into something that sounds inevitable rather than personal. She used those exact words, too poor, in the meeting, in front of two other people, with the specific confidence of a woman who has never once been required to account for what comes out of her mouth. The issue, Claudia Voss said, setting down the performance review folder with the deliberate placement of someone who has rehearsed this, is that you don't project the image this firm requires. Our clients notice these things, Poor said. The way you present yourself, your clothing, your car, the neighborhood you mentioned living in during the team lunch last month. She paused. We need people who look like they belong in the rooms we put them in. I think you understand what I mean. I understood exactly what she meant. Her assistant, pet daughter, a young woman named Becca, who had been in the room to take notes and who had the expression of someone who had not been told what kind of meeting this was before she sat down in it, was looking at the table. HR representative, horror answer, a man named Phil, who had attended more terminations than he could count, and had developed the specific professional neutrality of someone who has decided that neutrality is the most honest posture available to him in these situations. Tops was looking at his folder. Claudia was looking at me with the patient certainty of someone who has made a decision and is waiting for the other party to accept it. I was looking at Claudia. I understand what you mean, I said. Good, she said. Then this is simple. She slid the termination agreement across the desk. I picked it up. I read it. I signed it. I stood up, picked up my bag. The bag that had cost $23 at a market I had been going to since I was 7 years old. That our otter luck bag. The bag that Claudia had once looked at the way people look at things they consider beneath the level of acknowledgement. And I walked out of the office on the 22nd floor of a building in Midtown that I had owned through the property partnership. I had spent 8 years building. For the past 16 months, my name is Serena Wade. I am 36 years old. Putter, and the morning Claudia Voss told me I was too poor to work for her was the morning she set in motion the last significant decision of her professional life. I need to tell you about Claudia Voss the way she actually was, rather than the way she appeared. She was 48. She had been the founding partner of Voss & Partners Creative Consultancy for 11 years. The firm occupied the 22nd floor of a building that had won architectural awards and that photographed well, and that Claudia had chosen specifically because the address communicated, in the language of Midtown real estate, that Voss & Partners was the kind of firm whose clients arrived at meetings and felt, before anyone spoke a word, that they were in capable hands. She understood the semiotics of space. She understood the semiotics of appearance. What she did not understand was the person she had hired 3 years earlier specifically for her strategic analysis capabilities and had paid competitively because the capabilities were genuine and the results were measurable. And who had, in those 3 years, produced work that had landed 3 of the firm's largest accounts and retained 2 more at renewal. She understood the bag was $23. She did not understand that the person carrying it had been building something for 8 years in the hours before and after the job the bag was carried to. My story begins, in the way that most real stories begin, with a need. The need was my mother's. She had owned a small residential building in the Bronx for 22 years, 3 units, modest, building she had purchased when she was 34, dat 4, with money she had saved across 12 years of working double shifts as a home health aide. It was the thing she was most proud of in her life. It was also, at the time I was 28, in serious disrepair. The roof needed replacement. The electrical system needed updating. Plumbing in the second unit had been managed rather than fixed for 4 years in the way of things that cost too much to address and too much to ignore. My mother had the building, and not the capital. I had neither. Had was the specific education of someone who had grown up watching her mother own something and understanding from childhood. Ownership was the difference between the life you built and the life that happened to you. I had a finance degree I had earned on scholarship. I had 3 years of work experience. I had the savings that 3 years of living carefully had produced. And I had a professor from my undergraduate program, a woman named Dr. Okafor, who taught real estate finance and who had, 3 years after my graduation, emailed me with an opportunity that she thought matched what she remembered of how I thought. The email was about a small investment consortium she was forming. 5 participants, pooled, capital, disciplined, acquisitions, in the commercial real estate sector, with a specific focus on undervalued assets with structural problems that patient capital and good management could resolve. Pat. I had joined with everything I had. The consortium had made 3 acquisitions in 8 years. The third acquisition, completed 16 months ago, our dear daughter, was a 30-floor commercial building in Midtown, whose previous owner had been unable to fill its upper floors and had sold at a discount that the consortium's analysis had identified as significant. Held a 23% stake. My name was in the ownership documents of a building in which I also happened, through the specific coincidence of the employment market and the geographic concentration of my industry, to work. I had known this since the day the acquisition closed. I had told no one at Voss and Partners. I walked out of Claudia's office and took the elevator to the lobby. However, I stood in the lobby of my building. The renovation we had commissioned, the lobby improvements that had been part of the asset improvement plan, the building management staff who knew my name and my role and greeted me the way you greet someone you work for. And I called Dr. Okafor. She answered on the second ring. I need to tell you something, I said. Tell me, she said. I told her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. The lease renewal, she said. It's in 4 months. Yes, I said. You want to handle it yourself, she said. I want to be in the room, I said. I think that's fair. A pause. Serena, she said. Her voice had the specific tone of a woman choosing her words carefully. I want to make sure we're approaching this correctly. The lease terms need to be what they would be for any comparable tenant. Agreed, I said. I have no interest in punitive terms. I have significant interest in accurate ones. What does accurate mean? She said. It means market rate, I said. Which, given what comparable space in this building is currently renting for, is 14% above what Voss and Partners is currently paying on a lease that was signed 4 years ago. A silence. That's a significant increase, Dr. Okafor said. It's market rate, I said. They should have been paying at the last renewal if the previous management had done their job correctly. We've been absorbing the gap, and you want to correct it. I want to offer a fair lease at current market rate, I said, which is what we would offer any tenant. What Claudia Voss does with that offer is her decision. Dr. Okafor was quiet for a moment. All right, she said. I'll arrange the meeting. You'll be in the room. Thank you, I said. Serena, she said, are you okay? I thought about the meeting. The folder placed with deliberate precision. The word poor used in a conference room with 2 witnesses. The bag I had been carrying since I was 7 years old, shopping at a market with my mother. Yes, I said. I think I've been okay for a long time. I just needed to be in the right room. I spent the 4 months between the terminations and the lease meeting building 2 things. The first thing was the next phase of my professional life. I registered Serena Wade Strategic Consulting as a sole practice, contacted the 3 clients whose accounts I had personally developed at Voss and Partners, and had substantive conversations with 2 of them about whether their loyalty was to the firm or to the work. Both conversations went the same way. By the end of month 2, I had 2 retainer agreements and a 3rd client in discussion. The clients whose accounts I had built were, it turned out, clients whose accounts I had built. The distinction mattered. The second thing I built was the lease presentation, not the standard renewal package that existed, and the consortium's property manager had prepared it. What I built was the ownership narrative, the building's performance since acquisition, the capital improvements, the value that patient, disciplined ownership had added to an asset that had been underperforming when we acquired it. The specific, detailed picture of what this building was now versus what it had been 16 months ago, and who was responsible for the difference, built it. With the precision who had spent three years producing work that was presented in other people's names, and who was, for the first time, building something that would be presented in her own. The meeting was on a Thursday morning. 10 o'clock, I arrived at 9:40 and spoke with the building's lobby manager, a steady, capable man named Carl, who had been in the building for 6 years and who had, in the 16 months of our ownership, developed the specific regard for Dr. Okafor and me that good building managers develop for owners who pay attention. Big day? He said. Professional morning, I said. He smiled. He understood. I went upstairs. The meeting room was on the 6th floor, the building's own management suite, which was ours. Not Voss and Partners floors. Dr. Okafor was already there. 2 other consortium members were present, the property manager, and a chair at the table that had been placed with the specific geometry that said, "This seat is for someone who is part of this." I sat in it. The Voss and Partners team arrived at 10:02. Claudia Voss, her CFO, her operations director, and their outside real estate attorney came through the door in the professional cluster of a team that has been briefed and is ready. Claudia was mid-sentence when she entered, speaking to her CFO about something that was not the meeting. The specific multitasking of a senior executive filling transition time. She looked up when she reached her side of the table. She saw Dr. Okafor first. Made the assessment of a senior professional, appropriate, qualified, the right person to be running this meeting. She saw the property manager, the other consortium members. Then she saw me. The sentence she had been speaking did not finish. Watch the sequence. Not 4 seconds, not 5, but a longer, more complex processing. Because what Claudia Voss was holding was not simply the presence of a face she recognized in an unexpected context. She was holding the context itself, the room, the table, the consortium branding on the materials, the name on the folder in front of my position, Serena Wade, Park Okafor Property Consortium, managing partner. Processing was visible in the specific way that thoughts are visible when the face that is trying to contain them has not yet assembled the expression it needs. I held her gaze. I said nothing. Dr. Okafor opened the meeting. "Thank you all for coming," Dr. Okafor said. "We're here to discuss the renewal of Voss and Partners' lease on the 22nd floor, which comes due in 60 days. Turn it over to my partner, Serena Wade, to walk through the ownership profile and the proposed renewal terms." I opened my folder. "Good morning," I said. "Start with where the building is today versus where it was at acquisitions 16 months ago, and then we'll move to the renewal proposal." I presented for 11 minutes. I presented with the specific, professional ease of someone who has spent 4 months preparing this material and 3 years producing work at this level, and is doing it for the first time. A room where the material and the name attached to it are the same person. Claudia Voss sat through all 11 minutes. She asked 2 questions. Both were substantive. Both were answered directly. At the end of the presentation, her real estate attorney reviewed the renewal terms. The attorney asked the questions. Attorneys ask. The property manager answered them. The consortium members contributed where relevant. At the end of the meeting, the attorney said the terms would need executive review, standard, 2-week response window. The teams gathered their materials. And then, at the door, with the specific geometry of the situation completing itself. Claudia stopped. She turned. She looked at me with an expression I had not seen from her before. Not the patient certainty of the termination meeting. the managed performance of a senior executive conducting her business, something more exposed. How long? She said. 16 months, I said. You were employed here, she said. Yes, I said. Position served my learning objectives, and the commute was convenient. I paused. The building is a 23% stake in a consortium. Acquisition. The employment was a separate matter. Separate, she said. Professionally, yes, I said. Which is why the lease terms I've proposed are market rate rather than anything else. I run a business. Business decisions are made on business grounds. She was quiet. You signed the termination agreement, she said. I did, I said. The grounds you used were not legal ones. My attorney has that documentation. What happens with it is a separate conversation from this one. I paused. Today was about the lease. The terms are fair. I'd encourage you to accept them. A silence. The grounds I used, she said, repeating my words with the specific quality of someone testing them for structural integrity. Too poor, I said. Those were the exact words. In front of 2 witnesses. Phil has notes. She looked at the table. I'd encourage you to speak to your employment attorney before we have the other conversation, I said. Today was the lease. I suggest we keep it there. She said nothing further. She left. Her team followed. Voss and Partners accepted the renewal terms inside the 2-week window, 14% above their previous rate. Market rate. What a tenant pays when the building they occupy is owned by people who know what they are doing. The employment matter was handled through counsel. Header. It was resolved without public proceedings. The terms are confidential. What I can tell you is that Claudia Voss is no longer the managing partner of Voss and Partners. I can tell you is that the 2 clients I had developed are now retainer clients of Serena Wade, Strategic Consulting. I can tell you is that Becca, the assistant who had looked at the table during the termination meeting, emailed me 8 weeks after that meeting to ask whether I was hiring. She started the following month. She was, as I had suspected from the table looking, exactly the kind of person I wanted in my office. My mother's building in the Bronx has a new roof. I had it replaced 2 years ago. Not as a gift exactly, and not as a transaction. As the thing that needed doing, that I was finally in a position to do. The electrical system was updated the same year, the plumbing in the 2nd unit the year after. My mother called me when the roof was finished. She said, "Come see it." I drove up on a Saturday. Poor daughter. We stood on the sidewalk and looked at the building, the one she had bought at 34 with 12 years of double-shift savings, the one that had been the first thing I had ever understood about what ownership meant. "How does it look?" she said. I looked at the building, then I looked at her. "Like something that's going to last," I said. She took my arm. We stood there for a while. The building stood there too, followed. Maintained. Still hers. Always going to be hers. Some things, when they are built correctly, hold. Before you go, I need your honest answer in the comments right now. Claudia said the exact words, "too poor," in a termination meeting. Should Serena have used the lease terms as leverage, or was keeping them fair the more powerful choice? Tell me right now. I read every single one. If this story moved something in you, if you have ever been made to feel that where you came from was a liability in a room, where it was actually your foundation, hit that like button so this story finds everyone who needs it today. Okay, share it with someone who is building quietly, carrying a bag that cost $23, doing the work before the room knows to look. And if you believe that the most powerful address is the one on the deed, subscribe. Because every week, this channel tells the stories of women who built where no one thought to look. Our daughter. Your first month on Audible is free. Link in the description. The best stories always start with someone who had less than everyone thought and built more than anyone expected.